In the late 1930s, as the Great Depression slowly loosened its grip on the American economy, a quiet yet ambitious carmaker from South Bend, Indiana, prepared to challenge the giants of Detroit. Studebaker had long been known for its craftsmanship, a company that had built wagons for pioneers and vehicles for presidents. But now, facing the dominance of Ford, Chevrolet, and Plymouth, the brand's survival depended on creating a car that could combine affordability, beauty, and performance in one compelling package. That car would be the Studebaker Champion. The Champion was born out of necessity and vision. Studebaker, smaller than its Detroit rivals, couldn't compete with the massive production scale or marketing budgets of Ford or General Motors. Instead, it had to innovate intelligently. The company's management wanted a car that would be economical enough to attract middle-class Americans, yet refined and stylish enough to reflect Studebaker's tradition of quality. In 1938, under the leadership of Harold Vance and Paul Hoffman, a new design philosophy emerged: to build a light, efficient, and modern automobile that could proudly wear the Studebaker badge while standing toe-to-toe with America's best-selling cars. Engineers and designers worked tirelessly, guided by the principle that every pound saved meant more miles per gallon and lower production costs. The result was a car that weighed significantly less than its competitors. Its engine, a six-cylinder power plant designed for smoothness and reliability, gave the Champion both spirited performance and frugality. The design was equally striking, long, low, and clean, reflecting the aerodynamic thinking of the late 1930s. When it debuted in 1939, the Studebaker Champion was an instant success. At a time when most American cars looked similar, the Champion stood out. Its streamlined body and graceful proportions suggested speed and modernity. The front grille, modest yet elegant, carried Studebaker's unique identity. Buyers were impressed not only by its looks but also by its economy, up to 27 miles per gallon, a remarkable figure for the era. This made the Champion a favorite among those who wanted to drive farther for less, without sacrificing style or comfort. The car's interior reflected the same attention to detail. Studebaker engineers emphasized ergonomics and comfort, giving the driver and passengers more space than most competitors. Materials were of high quality, and the instrument panel was cleanly laid out, emphasizing functionality over flashiness. The Champion embodied a kind of quiet sophistication that appealed to people tired of exaggerated design or cheap shortcuts. Studebaker's marketing cleverly positioned the Champion as the car for champions, appealing to a sense of pride and individuality. This wasn't just another mass-produced vehicle, it was a car for people who valued intelligence and distinction. While Ford and Chevrolet relied on aggressive pricing and massive dealer networks, Studebaker focused on building relationships with customers who appreciated craftsmanship. The result was not only growing sales but also a passionate following that saw the Champion as something special, almost personal. As the 1940s dawned, America was on the brink of war, and the Champion's story became intertwined with the country's destiny. When World War II erupted, Studebaker shifted its production to military vehicles, including trucks and engines for the U.S. and Allied forces. But the spirit of the Champion never disappeared. It symbolized the resilience and ingenuity of American industry. When peace returned in 1945, the Champion was revived as one of the first all-new cars designed after the war, not just a rehashed pre-war model. The post-war Champion became a symbol of renewal. While many automakers simply updated their 1941 models, Studebaker shocked the public with a fresh, futuristic design. First by far with a post-war car, the company proudly proclaimed. The 1947 Champion looked like nothing else on American roads. Its low silhouette, sleek lines, and integrated fenders gave it an almost European sophistication. People stopped on the streets to stare at it. Dealers were overwhelmed with orders. The message was clear: Studebaker was back, and it was not afraid to lead. At the heart of this revival was industrial designer Raymond Loewy, a genius of form and function who had already reshaped American visual culture. Loewy's team, including Virgil Exner, brought aviation-inspired ideas into the Champion's design. The car's body was smooth and aerodynamic, as if sculpted by the wind itself. The hood flowed gracefully into the windshield, and the rear fenders blended seamlessly with the trunk. It was not just a car, it was a vision of the future, made real on the streets of post-war America. The Champion's engineering was as thoughtful as its styling. The reliable six-cylinder engine remained the core of its character, but improvements in performance and refinement made it even better suited for the booming American highways. It could cruise effortlessly at 60 miles per hour, while delivering fuel economy that Ford and Chevrolet could only envy. Studebaker's independent front suspension gave it a smooth and stable ride, further enhancing its reputation for comfort and quality. Owners of the Champion often spoke of the pride they felt behind the wheel. It was not merely transportation, it was a statement of individuality. Driving a Studebaker said you were different, that you valued innovation over conformity. For many returning soldiers and their families, the Champion represented freedom and progress, the promise of a better life after years of hardship. Studebaker's advertising captured that emotion perfectly. One campaign showed a young couple driving their new Champion into the sunset, with the tagline emphasizing a new beginning for America. The car was sold not just as a machine, but as part of a dream of independence, achievement, and optimism. By the late 1940s, Studebaker was at its peak. The Champion led sales for the company and earned critical acclaim from the automotive press. Dealers struggled to keep up with demand. The once small wagon maker from Indiana had become a genuine competitor to Ford and Chevrolet, something few would have believed possible a decade earlier. Yet beneath this success, challenges loomed. The very qualities that made Studebaker admired, its commitment to distinctive design and craftsmanship, also made it expensive to produce. Ford and General Motors could afford to cut prices to win sales, while Studebaker's smaller scale made such tactics dangerous. Still, during those post-war years, the Champion held its own with dignity, offering something Detroit's giants often forgot: authenticity. In 1950, the Champion evolved once again, embracing the jet age aesthetic that captivated America. The front end grew more dramatic, with a bullet nose design that made it instantly recognizable. Inspired by aircraft styling, the bullet nose became an icon of the era, a daring, futuristic touch that turned heads everywhere. Some loved it, others mocked it, but no one could ignore it. Studebaker had once again proven that it was unafraid to be different. The 1950 to 1951 Champions were among the most striking American cars of their time. Their advanced engineering and distinctive looks attracted adventurous buyers who wanted something other than the safe, predictable choices of Ford or Chevrolet. The interiors became more refined, with two-tone color schemes and chrome accents that reflected the optimism of the new decade. Studebaker's success with the Champion also had cultural resonance. In a nation obsessed with progress, the company represented the underdog spirit, the belief that innovation could triumph over sheer size. The Champion appeared in films, magazines, and local parades, often described as the thinking man's car. It symbolized independence at a time when conformity ruled. But as the 1950s progressed, the automotive battlefield grew harsher. Ford and Chevrolet engaged in price wars that squeezed smaller manufacturers. Each year, they introduced bigger, flashier cars, with ever more chrome and horsepower. Studebaker, with its limited resources, struggled to keep pace. Yet it continued to innovate within its means. By 1953, Studebaker introduced one of the most beautiful cars in American history, the redesigned Champion, now featuring the graceful, lowy coupe body. It was low, sleek, and modern, with proportions that anticipated sports cars of the future. The front end was clean and aerodynamic, the roofline elegant, and the car's overall stance suggested motion even when parked. Critics hailed it as one of the best-looking cars ever produced in America. Owners adored the 1953 Champion for its blend of practicality and sophistication. It was not a luxury car, but it felt special. Its smooth inline-six engine delivered reliable performance, and its handling was nimble compared to the bulky sedans of the Big Three. Drivers enjoyed its sense of lightness and balance, the way it seemed to glide over the road rather than plow through it. It was, in every sense, a driver's car, something rare in the American market of the early 1950s. Studebaker also explored new body styles and trim levels, offering sedans, coupes, and convertibles. Each variant carried the same sense of individuality that had defined the Champion from the beginning. Even the name Champion resonated deeply with buyers. It suggested victory, endurance, and pride. Despite financial pressures, Studebaker continued to build the Champion with a level of care that mass producers often sacrificed. Body panels were hand-fitted, paint quality was exceptional, and interiors were assembled with attention to detail. For many owners, that craftsmanship became a point of loyalty. Once you owned a Studebaker, you rarely forgot it. Still, the cracks in the company's foundations began to widen. Studebaker's production costs were rising, and its factories in South Bend were aging. The Big Three could afford to redesign their cars annually, but Studebaker couldn't. Yet even in this difficult environment, the Champion remained a symbol of determination, a reminder that innovation and heart could compete with might and money. By the mid-1950s, the Champion was updated with modest facelifts and improvements. New chrome details, larger glass areas, and improved engines kept it relevant. But the automotive world was changing fast. Consumers demanded power, tail fins, and extravagance, while Studebaker remained rooted in elegance and restraint. The company's identity as the intelligent alternative to Detroit's excesses became both its strength and its limitation. Still, wherever a Champion rolled down a street or a country road, it carried with it a story of American independence and craftsmanship. It was the car of small business owners, teachers, veterans, and dreamers. It was the car of people who didn't want to blend in. In many ways, it was America's true underdog hero on wheels. To drive a Studebaker Champion in those years was to be part of something special. You were not just buying a product, you were buying into a philosophy. It was a belief that good design, honest engineering, and courage could still make a difference in a world ruled by corporations. And for nearly 2 decades, that belief held true. As the 1950s moved toward their close, the American automobile industry entered its most competitive and extravagant phase. Chrome gleamed on every corner, tail fins reached toward the sky, and V8 engines became symbols of national pride. Ford and Chevrolet were selling millions of cars a year, saturating the market with variety, color, and promotion. Studebaker, still producing excellent machines, found itself fighting not only for sales but for survival. The Champion remained the company's most vital product, its nameplate of hope, but even a Champion could not easily win against such giants. In 1955, Studebaker made another bold attempt to capture attention with a redesigned Champion that emphasized the optimism of the Eisenhower era. The car adopted sharper lines, more chrome, and a sense of motion that echoed jet aircraft and rockets. It was elegant but not excessive, still bearing the refined proportions that Studebaker's designers prized. Inside, it featured new dashboards, two-tone upholstery, and more powerful engines. The Champion was trying to keep up with the trends, but with fewer resources and smaller budgets, every redesign carried financial risk. Despite the difficulties, the car still earned admiration. Automotive journalists continued to praise Studebaker's build quality and handling, noting that even the base Champion models offered a driving experience more sophisticated than some larger rivals. The 6-cylinder engine, though modest in displacement, delivered smooth torque and surprising efficiency. For drivers who valued balance over brute power, the Champion was still one of the most rewarding American cars to drive. Studebaker's engineers also experimented with technical innovations that preceded industry trends. Power steering and automatic transmissions became available, and the company's research into fuel economy foreshadowed concerns that would dominate decades later. Yet the financial numbers told a harsher story. Production costs remained high, and sales volumes were not enough to sustain large-scale operations. In 1956, the Champion received further refinements, including updated styling and interior comforts, but it was becoming clear that Studebaker's independence was in jeopardy. The company's management began seeking alliances and mergers to survive. In 1954, Studebaker merged with Packard, another proud but struggling American manufacturer, forming the Studebaker-Packard Corporation. The union was meant to create strength through cooperation, but instead it often produced confusion and internal tension. Packard loyalists and Studebaker loyalists had different visions, and the resources were stretched thin. Nevertheless, the Champion endured through these turbulent years as the spiritual core of the brand. It symbolized Studebaker's fighting spirit, the belief that smart design could still triumph over market power. Even as Packard declined, the Champion kept Studebaker's name alive on the highways of America. In small towns, in farm driveways, and on city streets, the car continued to represent dignity, modesty, and pride. By 1958, the name Champion was replaced by the new Studebaker Scotsman and later the Lark, but its DNA lived on. The Lark, introduced in 1959, was essentially a modern evolution of the Champion's compact and efficient philosophy. It was smaller than the big cars from Detroit, easier to park, and cheaper to run. The Lark's success in its first years proved that Studebaker's instincts had been right all along. There was a market for intelligent, economical cars. The Champion had planted that seed 2 decades earlier. If the Champion had once challenged giants like Ford and Chevrolet in style and innovation, its spirit now continued through the Lark's practicality and courage. The early Lark sold well, giving Studebaker a temporary resurgence, but the company's long-term financial struggles remained severe. Factories in South Bend were aging, tooling costs were high, and the relentless pace of change in the car industry demanded investments that Studebaker could no longer afford. By the early 1960s, the automobile landscape had changed dramatically. Compact imports from Europe, Volkswagen, Renault, and Fiat, had begun attracting American buyers. Ironically, these cars followed the same design philosophy that Studebaker had pioneered with the Champion: lightweight, economy, and simplicity. In another era, the Champion might have thrived among them, but its time had passed. Still, the Champion's legacy could be felt everywhere. Designers and historians would later recognize that the 1939 to 1958 Champions had anticipated ideas that became mainstream decades later: aerodynamic efficiency, driver-centered interiors, and modest engines that balanced performance with economy. The Champion had been ahead of its time, often misunderstood in a culture obsessed with size and power. Those who owned a Champion during its production years often held onto it for life. Many families kept them running through the 1960s and 1970s, long after Studebaker closed its doors in 1966. Some used them as daily drivers, others as cherished keepsakes of an era when independence still mattered in American industry. Enthusiasts restored them lovingly, attending car shows and telling stories of the time when a company from Indiana dared to take on Detroit and nearly succeeded. The Champion's endurance was not just mechanical, it was emotional. It represented a certain kind of American ideal, the belief that quality and integrity could still stand against mass production and marketing muscle. It stood for the idea that innovation could come from passion rather than size, and that true greatness required courage, not conformity. In retrospect, the Champion's story can be read as both a triumph and a tragedy. It triumphed by proving that Studebaker could compete with the best. It offered the American public cars that were often more advanced, more efficient, and more beautiful than anything else in their price class. But it was also a tragedy because even such excellence could not overcome the ruthless economics of the automobile industry. In the end, the giants it once challenged outlasted it, but never erased its memory. Collectors today prize the Studebaker Champion not only for its design but for what it represents. Early models from the 1939 to 1942 period are admired for their purity and simplicity, while post-war models from 1947 to 1951 capture the optimism of a new age. The 1953 to 1954 coupes are widely considered among the most beautiful American cars ever built. Each version tells a chapter of a uniquely American story: the rise, glory, and endurance of a brand that refused to surrender its soul. At classic car gatherings, when a Champion rolls in, people stop and look. Its lines still hold power: the graceful curves, the low stance, the balanced proportions. Those who know its history see more than metal and chrome, they see a testament to vision. They see the courage of engineers and designers who believed in making something better, even when the odds were impossible. The Champion also serves as a reflection of American society through decades of change. In 1939, it represented hope and recovery. In 1947, it symbolized renewal after war. In the 1950s, it embodied individuality in a decade of conformity. Its evolution mirrored the nation's own transformation, from hardship to prosperity, from modest dreams to grand ambitions. Driving a Studebaker Champion today is an act of remembrance. The sound of its inline-six engine, the feel of its steering wheel, the smell of its aged interior, all evoke an era when cars were more than appliances. They were personal, crafted expressions of ingenuity. Each champion still running today carries not just its own story, but the story of the people who built and loved it. It's easy to forget how revolutionary the Champion was when it first appeared. Before it, small and efficient cars were often dismissed as cheap or dull. The Champion proved they could be desirable, comfortable, and modern. Its influence extended far beyond Studebaker's own lineup, inspiring other manufacturers to rethink what the American car could be. The philosophy of more with less that defined the Champion would later resurface in the compact car movements of the 1970s, decades after Studebaker's factories went silent. Even in design schools today, students study the 1953 Champion Coupe as an example of timeless form. Its proportions, clarity of line, and aerodynamic efficiency continue to inspire admiration. The car's understated elegance stands in contrast to the excesses of its era, making it feel almost contemporary even now. It is one of those rare designs that transcends time. For historians, the Champion remains a case study in courage. It shows how an independent company, guided by vision rather than volume, could achieve greatness. It reminds us that innovation often flourishes on the margins, where creativity replaces abundance. Studebaker's engineers and designers worked with limited means but infinite imagination, and that combination produced cars that could move both body and spirit. When Studebaker finally ceased automobile production in 1966, the world lost more than just a brand, it lost one of its most genuine dreamers. The Champion's nameplate was gone, but its spirit lived on in every enthusiast who refused to forget it. Around the world, collectors keep these cars alive, restoring them not just to drive, but to honor a legacy of perseverance. In South Bend, the old Studebaker factory buildings still stand as silent witnesses to that golden age. The Studebaker National Museum preserves the memory of those who believed that excellence could come from passion, not just power. Visitors can see early wagons, sleek post-war Champions, and futuristic prototypes that never reached production. Each tells a story of ambition and artistry, a story of a company that dreamed bigger than its size allowed. Among the exhibits, the 1953 Champion Coupe remains a centerpiece. Its presence is almost spiritual, a reminder that beauty can emerge from struggle. People stand before it in quiet admiration, understanding that this was more than a car, it was a statement of identity, a symbol of defiance against mediocrity. For those who drove them in their youth, the Champion was often their first real car, the one that carried them to work, to love, to freedom. Its memory lingers in the minds of those who recall the soft hum of its engine on a summer night, the way its headlights lit up the road like a promise. It was not the fastest or the most luxurious, but it had soul, and that made all the difference. In the vast history of the American automobile, the Studebaker Champion occupies a rare and respected place. It was a car that dared to be intelligent in an age of excess, elegant in an age of flamboyance, and sincere in an age of marketing. It never dominated the sales charts, but it won something far greater, admiration that endured long after production ceased. Looking back, one realizes that Studebaker's true victory was not measured in numbers but in legacy. The Champion proved that a small company could leave a giant footprint through innovation, courage, and taste. It showed that being different could be powerful, and that chasing perfection was more meaningful than chasing volume. Today, when enthusiasts restore a Studebaker Champion, they are not just reviving a car, they are reviving a philosophy. They are keeping alive a belief in quality, honesty, and creativity. Every gleaming hood, every polished fender, every rumbling engine is an act of devotion to an ideal that refuses to fade. In a world where the automobile has become standardized and digital, the Champion reminds us of a more human time. It speaks of artisans who shaped steel with pride, of engineers who chased efficiency with heart, of dreamers who refused to surrender to giants. It whispers that greatness does not always come from power, it comes from character. And so, more than half a century after the last Champion left the factory, its spirit still rides the open road. Somewhere, on a quiet highway beneath the wide American sky, a Studebaker Champion glides past the fields and towns, its engine singing softly, its chrome catching the sun. It carries with it not just its passengers, but the memory of an age when courage built cars, and dreams built companies. The Studebaker Champion was, and remains, more than a car. It was a promise kept by a company that believed in doing things differently. It was the underdog that defied the odds. It was the American car that dared to challenge giants, and, for a shining moment in history, stood among them as an equal.